Open quote, from the Psychiatric Department of Professor Dr. Zet Myslivecek, close quote, Assistant Dr. Svetozar Nevola, Visions of the Eyes, or more literally, Visual Hallucinations. Special reprint from Czech Neurology and Psychiatry, number 4, volume 4, 1941. Open quote, Antonin J., 5270, a 35-year-old shoemaker, unemployed. Chronic alcoholism, rudimentary delirium. He states that 2 years ago, after heavy drinking bouts, one evening in the dark he began seeing eyes, distorted mouths, and all sorts of grimaces directed at him. At other times, he saw a dog trying to bite him. Such a dog's head, I thought it was already a sign of insanity. It frightened me. Lately, he became heavily intoxicated again, and in the evenings experienced visions. Again, I see eyes rolling toward me as if someone were doing it to me. They come closer, and then move away from me, he says, bulging his eyes. Another person, he says, would not see it, but in his conviction, he insisted that it was real. Close quote. Open quote. These observations of hallucinated eyes may also be associated with visual illusions involving eyes. We shall illustrate this with an example from our own observations during mescaline intoxication. At the beginning of the intoxication, the surroundings soon begin to take on a peculiar character. Among other things, ordinary objects acquire a special expressive quality and a distinctive relationship to the subject. In all objects, there appears a certain animation, as though they had intentions toward the subject, as though they were coming to life, like in Andersen's fairy tales. Open quote, everything that is seen tends to become geometrized or ornamented. Some of the most conspicuous shapes, for example, a photograph of a landscape or of the moon, are perceived as faces, among which the eyes are the most characteristic feature. A telephone receiver is perceived, at first glance, as two large eyes and a toothed mouth. A jug in a picture is seen as a devilish, distorted face with sunken eyes, although these were merely two inconspicuous darker spots that had never before suggested eyes. Other accidental spots are perceived, in rapidly changing forms, as eyes. Other faces, however, are often only vaguely sensed rather than clearly seen. Close quote. This is a translation of a historical Czech psychiatric text describing subjective visual experiences reported during mescaline intoxication. It reflects the author's observations and terminology from the period rather than current scientific interpretations. The highlighted passages translate into English as follows. Open quote. At other times we encounter illusions of eye movement, close quote. V. Anna P., 9076, 72 years old. Senile dementia. Open quote. She heard voices from the little window telling her that she would be killed. When she looked at her own photograph hanging on the wall, she saw its eyes moving. She believed that she was being hypnotized. Close quote. Open quote. Similar illusions of eye movement occur in certain obsessive states and have also been recorded, for example, during mescaline intoxication. Morselli observed, in an experiment on himself, that a picture hanging on the wall seemed to come to life. He saw its eyes moving. This illusion persisted after the intoxication, and even 2 months later, the illusion would reappear whenever the author looked at the picture. At that stage, however, the illusion had become psychogenic. Close quote. Open quote. Hallucinations of eyes are also encountered in dreams among otherwise healthy individuals. Close quote. Open quote. NN. During childhood, he frequently had a recurring anxiety dream. T, a toy teddy bear, suddenly assumed a rigid expression with sticky, bulging eyes. This was followed by anxiety that persisted even after awakening. It was not that T was looking directly at the subject, rather, T stared vaguely into the distance. Later, he once thought that two large yellow eyes were looking at him from the window with a fixed stare. He became frightened and called his mother, saying that there were two eyes in the window trying to hypnotize him. Close quote, open quote. As an adult, he once dreamed of faces staring at him with terrifying eyes. The most conspicuous features of the faces were the eyes and the nose. Even after waking, he briefly continued to see the eyes and nose on the blanket. Then the gaze seemed to slide down onto the floor, where it gradually dissolved. The dream was accompanied by mild anxiety. This is a faithful translation of a historical psychiatric publication from 1941. The text describes case reports and observations from that period, including reports involving illusions of moving eyes during mescaline intoxication, psychiatric conditions, and dreams. Open quote. Among visual hallucinations, the most commonly observed were visions of human figures, often veiled so that their limbs were not visible. Their faces were frequently indistinct. At times, however, patients saw nothing more than a face alone, or merely a pair of eyes staring at them through the bars of the bed. These visions usually occurred at night upon awakening. They remained motionless and were generally accompanied by feelings of anxiety. The patients experienced them as real. During such episodes, they were often in a depressed state, convinced that some misfortune was about to befall them or that the apparition represented someone who had recently died. However, eyes also play an important role in hallucinations, illusions, and other psychopathological phenomena in a variety of other ways. We present the following observations as examples. Close quote, open quote. As a visual counterpart to persecutory auditory hallucinations, one may regard the phenomenon of the vision of eyes. Its precursor can be found in various illusions in which the patient perceives strange expressions on the otherwise indifferent faces of people around them, characteristic facial expressions, or meaningful glances. Likewise, they may perceive unusual significance in people's gestures, or believe that statues and paintings move their eyes and look at them. We also encounter patients who experience visions of various heads, or merely faces, which make grotesque grimaces at them, laugh at them, mock them, assume meaningful expressions, or simply stare fixedly at them. If such a vision, which communicates with the subject through its facial expression, is reduced even further, what ultimately remains is a vision of eyes alone, since the eyes are the most characteristic element of the entire facial expression, through which one person can exert a psychological influence upon another by means of sight. It is the experience of someone being present and in contact with the patient, specifically through the gaze of their eyes. Close quote.